we hustled from day one. I don't think people know this, but I used to take tours of Delhi. Like literally, we used to take people on tours of Delhi to make, money to keep our business, running. So I'd like take people to Shahpur Jat, and I'd take people to Lodi, and show them. I mean, we've done like the, funniest things in order to just make sure that we had capital to keep the business going, right?
Today's guest is someone who knows the business of brands very well, is intelligent, sharp, and an avid reader, the CEO and founder of LBB, an online marketplace for homegrown brands, Suchita Sarwan. With Suchita's vast experience of working with founders, I thought it'll be interesting to know about small things that can help business owners to build brands and market it. While we chatted a lot about brands, I also tried to understand how Suchita manages to pack everything in her schedule, including work, running a home, reading, being part of a book club, all this while being extremely active on social media to talk about things that matter. Suchita, thank you so much for joining Questions I Wanted to Ask. I am glad you could make time and I'm so happy to have you.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Is it like a busy Saturday for you?
Actually, yes, because I think we're in the middle of like closing a bunch of projects. So, and usually I end up working half of Saturday and half of Sunday. But yeah, it's a usual Saturday. Let's just keep it at that.
I observed that I think you do work most of the Saturdays. So tell me something. I mean, I know as an entrepreneur there are no switch offs, right? But it is still a question. How do you switch off then? Like, when do you switch off? Do you actually switch off?
So, I think I made peace with like not switching off. I think generally I have a lot of energy. There are some people who are like very calm and composed and, and have that temperament. I am generally a very high energy person. And I think everyone looks for releases of energy, right? So for me, for example, like, my work is a release. I really enjoy reading and listening to podcasts and this, that, and the other. So that's my, other release. I also watch a lot of trashy TV shows. I know I project this like, very, intellectual shtick on my Instagram, but I have probably seen every episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians and this, that, and the other. So, so I'll just say, don't believe my like Twitter and IG persona. I do enjoy working a lot, but I think for me, it's more of, all these things that I do just become this, release of energy for me because that's what I need, given I am a high energy person.
I'm so glad you mentioned about trashy TV shows because we all have. Like, I watch a lot of Korean and Asian content, right? And a lot of women who've come and we've spoken about, their choices of kind of content and all of that. But tell me, yes, of course, or we all know, we all follow. Anybody who follows you knows you read a lot. And of course, you're spending a lot of time on the business and all of that. How do you structure all this time? Of course, there are only limited hours, right? You are part of a book club, which means you have to read books, which means you will read beyond that also, right? And then, of course, you have to read for the business and the environment you're in. How do you structure your time?
So I think for me, the time that I take out to learn is also the time that I have to decompress, to a fair extent. So what I usually do is, I'll start my day with either a book or a podcast. I like ending my day with a podcast. I don't like reading, at the end of a long day. I also, again, really enjoy walking. So the audio format works fairly well for me. I usually spend my weekends catching up on reading. There are a couple of, newsletters that I subscribe to, and I make it a point to make sure that I read those newsletters because, again, it just helps me become better at my job. So I think the way I sort of compartmentalize it is, in the morning before 9 a.m. Is usually the time that I have to just consume as much content as I can. And then, towards the evening. And the weekends, usually in between Saturday and Sunday, is when, I'll take out a good 3-4 hours in the day to just catch up on, books that I'm either supposed to read for my book club or otherwise, or just generally like podcasts and content and, articles, etc. that I enjoy.
And then in between all of this, you're also very, very active on social media, whether talking about your own personal choices of content and, talking about, LBB, etc. How do you then disconnect from that social media? Because a lot of us who tend to go on social media then find it very difficult to away from it. How do you have like a structure ki
Yeah,
abhi?
so I think, I find, and I'm not saying this just to like trash on social media, but I
Hmm,
usually find, Instagram a giant waste of time. My reasons for using Instagram, for example, is, if you've got a campaign coming up
hmm,
for LBB and I'm looking for references, I look at Instagram. I thoroughly enjoy home decor. So, for example, if I'm just looking for like design inspo, I'll end up using Instagram. I
hmm,
use Pinterest for the same reason. If I have something, if I'm looking for like a specific graphic reference, which I want to share with my colleagues, or a campaign reference that I want to share with my colleagues, I'll end up using those platforms. Twitter, I try staying away from, but I do end up finding a lot of very good content on Twitter. So
hmm,
there are certain people who I follow who end up sharing a lot of like articles. I think my sort of, rule is there's a type of person who I like following.
hmm.
And usually the type of person is, someone who either has really phenomenal taste in home and interiors, or the other type of person is basically, people who are from the space that I'm in, who share a lot of, information, who share a lot of context.
Yeah,
I generally really like, following people who will either give credit to their sources of information or write,
sure.
high quality opinion pieces. So, for example, there's Benedict Evans, who does a fantastic job of covering just commerce and Amazon in general. And then there's Ben Thompson, who has this awesome blog slash website called Stratechery, where he just really takes out time to write thought through, thorough opinion pieces on different things that are happening within tech. So I think my thumb rule is, either you have a really nice house, or you're someone who I can learn from, and those are the two, kinds of folks who I'll end up following for information. And I think that's what's helped me also curb down my usage, because, like
Hmm.
any other millennial, it's always very tempting to, open up Instagram and get sort of sucked into it, or open up Twitter and get very riled up by, the
What's
general
happening?
sort of like context-less opinions that
Hmm,
are being flung around. But I
hmm.
think for me, what, at least has helped me stay very focused is I'm just very clear about my objectives. And either you align with my objectives or you don't. And accordingly, I choose to, engage on these platforms.
Interesting. Interesting. Tell me, s- since you mentioned home decor, I'm assuming this is a passion or an interest which actually started even before LBB, or which is there like
It's literally just COVID induced.
really?
I realized that, we literally live in the most like sparse home. And I think for me, it's the same thing, right? Outlet. Like earlier, my outlet used to be exercising, but then COVID
Hmm.
happened. And I just found sitting on my ass to be much more fun than sweating in the gym. So, and it's actually this, running joke where like my husband will say, basically, your idea of working out is lifting furniture, which is not far from the truth. So yeah, so my love for all things home, literally just came through COVID. And again, I didn't want to consume fashion content, and you know what I mean. Like you've got all of these verticals. I don't really enjoy
Yeah.
fashion contents, and the other content for me became home, and that's that. But if not home, I think another space that I'd love is like UI UX, because I thoroughly enjoy just design in general.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's where my home decor obsession came from.
Yeah, and it's beautiful how it translates to what you also do at LBB in terms of, I mean, a part of it, I'm sure. But I could literally, like, when I see your posts, and I was like, okay, but this is how she also probably structures her, the entire home decor section on LBB, right? And I think that's something that I wanted to kind of bring about, that a lot of times, the passion or things that you're interested in can actually translate and add on to things that you do at work.
100%. And, I think a lot of like working at LBB is about having a point of view. And, having a point of view comes from like having tastes and preferences. And I think anything that's soft, right? Like anything that's design related, usually helps you exercise, parts of your brain that give you a sense of what your taste or what your preference is. And I think with a lot of us, like with a lot of my colleagues, obviously everyone's interested in different categories, right? There are some people who are very enthused about food. There are others, who really enjoy their like coffee. And then there are others who enjoy, workouts. I think everyone has their passion. But I think, the job to be done of our passion isn't really we're taking our passion and extending it into our work, because obviously if I have a aesthetic, it doesn't mean our consumers, which run in millions, will like exactly what I like or any individual likes. But I think to immerse yourself in some form of art is a great way to develop your own tastes and preferences. And I think that's really what my external passions do for me. They just help me develop tastes and preferences and give me a point of view, which I think is super important in the work that we're doing.
Interesting. I mean, it's very rare that, I mean, as Indians, I don't think so. A lot of us have have grown up or have been told to inculcate passion, right? And it bothers me because now in a world where we are all confined to our own homes, besides work, the only thing that can take you away from your work is passion, and we just don't know what to do with it or about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't know if it's if it's just being Indian. I think a lot of it also has to do with context, right? I think all of us are lucky that we had grandparents and parents who afforded us some amount of privilege, and gave us the opportunity to really understand different parts of art and culture. I think for me, one big advantage of being in a city like Delhi is you have culture all around you, right? And you have to work really hard to escape it, right? Like you have to go to Gurgaon to escape Delhi's culture. With all due respect to whoever's from Gurgaon and listening to this. I mean, everything from like the history that Delhi has to, the markets that Delhi has, a lot of it is steeped in this, exactly, right? A lot of it is steeped in this understanding of like it's culture surrounds you. It's on you to, pick and choose how you want it to extend into your everyday life. And I don't know, I think, growing up, I mean, it's not like, my parents inculcated any sense of, read about the arts or, know about architecture, any of that. I think a lot of it actually just started with the fact that, I just grew up in Delhi and actually the genesis of LBB was me wanting to understand my city a little better. And I think that's when I, started going to NGMA and all these great galleries that Delhi has that, I mean, no one really goes to, though they must be visited. So I think just my, interest in having in art and culture, a lot of it is just genuinely just come from the city that I live in, and not because I was ever told to follow my passion or frankly to even have any passion. But I think it just came from, just letting yourself explore your surroundings a little more and seeing what you can get from it.
Interesting. You spoke about actually the genesis of LBB coming from you wanting to explore things. And if you see, I mean, and it's for everyone to see, but LBB literally started as one Tumblr blog, right?
Yep.
And to what it is today, and one of the biggest local brand marketplace in India, if that's the correct term for it. And when I look at this journey, and this is something that I was telling you offline also, that what's very interesting for me is that, today there is this entire boom of, startup brands and all of that stuff in India. And we are all looking saying, अच्छा मैं entrepreneur हूँ, मुझे ये brand बनाना है, मेरे को Mamaearth बनना है, या मुझे XYZ brand बनना है. I mean, and but we all don't realize that there are so many years behind it. It's been so many. Would you want to talk about the initial things, those initial things that require for you to even start to build a brand?
Yeah, I think what people don't talk about enough is the money that it takes.
Yes.
Like even for me, when LBB started as a Tumblr page, I was still working full time at the BBC, right? And I would do
Hmm.
this on the weekends for fun, where I would, just go to a new part of like Delhi and, take pictures and post about it on my Tumblr blog, which then, became a website. We bootstrapped the business for 2 years before I found a technical co-founder and before we raised our first round of money. And even through those 2 years, it's not like I was supporting myself with I was all of 23, 24, and whatever little savings that I had, it went into just investing in our website. So we were making money for FBB, but none of it was necessarily coming to my pocket. So
Sure.
I think the first thing that people don't realize is that it takes money to really build a startup, and again, how much money varies from person to person. For some people, it could be just a quick WhatsApp handle. For someone like us, there was a requirement for a web platform. There was a requirement to pay for certain people on your payroll in order to build this platform up better. But I think step number one is you need to figure out. I don't want to say what you're passionate about, because I think passion is a little overrated, especially if
Yeah.
you want to build a business.
Yeah.
I do think you need to generally just have a sense of what are you interested in.
Yeah.
Because and I think for me, my interest has always been in brands, right? In marketing, in just being curious. Like I am genuinely curious about anything and everything that's out there, but more specifically how brands are built. So
Sure.
and that's a lot of what my experience taught me as well. So I think you need to start with some form of, like, you need to figure out how much capital will my interest take, and really what am I interested in.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I learned at hindsight, which I would recommend to a lot of folks tinkering with ideas or thinking of what they want to start, is really think through what market are you going after, because it's not difficult to launch a business or a brand, but it's very difficult to build a business and a
Build.
brand, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think people usually confuse launching with building. And I think that's where it's a difference in between the two, where the delta really lies, and that delta really comes from understanding what is the market that I'm going after, who is my customer, why do I exist, what
Sure.
price point should I play around with. So I think in the slightly more like modern or urban understanding of what entrepreneurship or startup looks like, it would be some of these three, right? Figure out your interest, find capital, figure out what is the market that I'm really building for, and that really becomes your step one and your foundation for building things up.
Yeah. But tell me something, you were still, or you kind of had the ability to be able to go to people, raise funds at the initial, after the maybe the initial 2 years. And what about smaller businesses or businesses who would literally start from, zero, smaller, and you have so many of them on, the platform of LBB. What happens to those who don't have money to start, but have a great product or have a great market where they're doing well, right? How does one make that bigger?
I think there are a lot of opportunities for brands to grow. And I
Hmm.
think today, it's so easy to kickstart your journey. So, for example, there are multiple marketplaces, obviously, LBB being one of them, where you
Sure.
can list your products, right? There are dime a dozen pop ups and exhibitions that happen
Hmm.
across, cities, from the smallest to the largest, where you can go in, give your products to customers and get them to try it. There
Sure.
are multiple sampling opportunities that exist. There are Facebook groups that you can be a part of. Every single big brand started with fairly humble beginnings. I mean, even for us in the beginning,
Hmm.
it's not like we had much capital to rest on, right? So
Hmm.
after that initial investment that went into building a website,
Hmm.
we hustled from day one. I don't think people know this, but I used to take tours of Delhi. Like literally, we used to take people on tours of Delhi to make money to keep our business running. So
Hmm.
I'd like take people to Shahpur Jat, and I'd take people to Lodi, and show them. I mean, we've done like the funniest things in order to just make sure that we had capital to keep the business going, right?
Yeah.
We've participated ourselves in pop-ups and exhibitions. We've hosted pop-ups and exhibitions. But
Yeah.
I think, no matter how small a brand you are, I think there are so many tools that are available for brands today. And a lot of them are free, right? Everything from Facebook to Instagram to listing yourself on a platform like LBB to, using platforms like InstaMojo or Razorpay, and just having that payment gateway, right? There are
Gateway.
Facebook groups that you can be a part of, where you can test out your products. In fact, I remember on the LBB Open House podcast when I was interviewing the Mamaearth guys. Even they tested their products on mom groups on Facebook. That's really how they began. And, they were lucky that, one of the moms who found out about them through this like ripple effect, ended up helping them in raise their, first round of funding. And that's really where they grew from. Brands like Sleepy Owl, which are very popular today. I remember, the first time they sold their coffee, they sold it in our office. One of the first times, and the first time they really put their product out there was at this event that we used to do pre-COVID called Dessert Bazaar, which is basically an offline event
I
for
know.
home bakers and caterers, etc., to exhibit their products. So
Yeah.
I think there's dime a dozen opportunities for brands to really start small, and put themselves out there. And I actually think now the infrastructure, both technical and physical, exists in order to help these brands out.
Interesting. Tell me, you interact with so many men and women business owners, entrepreneurs, and this thing. I always feel that, and I know I'm asking a very, very stereotypical question, but I know a lot of people would want to hear this. A lot of female business owners or women entrepreneurs need more extra help, especially when it comes to marketing themselves, right? Uh, how would you? What are your suggestions? What would you tell them? Do you feel that there is something that they need to do extra to be able to people who don't know how to market themselves? How do they, like women who don't know how to market themselves?
So I think, you're talking about how often I post on social media. I genuinely don't post out of like, any other desire, but I do know that, it's important for me to do whatever it takes to make my brand as successful as I possibly can, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and for us, especially because we operate as a marketplace, there has to be trust building that happens both on the customer side as well as the merchant side. So
Sure.
I think with a lot of and frankly, I don't see this issue only with women founders, especially when it comes to consumer brands. I see it with men
Yeah.
as well. I think at the end of the day, you need to do it for your business.
Yeah.
And today, so much of like purchase, sale, excitement around your brand is actually built by your story and your excitement about what it is that you're building. I interact with founders on a almost daily basis, and you can tell the difference in between someone who's in it just to make a quick buck and someone who's in it because they, are genuinely very excited about what they're building. And I think, as a founder, whether you like it or not, it is a part of your job to put yourself and your brand out there. To people who are a little, who are looking at this with some amount of trepidation, I'd just say that, remember that you have to do it for your brand, right? And the second you switch to that lens, saying that, okay, I'm doing this for my brand, I'm not doing this for myself, it just becomes much easier an exercise to do. And again, to anyone who's listening, I'd give my own example. I'm very uncomfortable being on any, any platform. I have like no desire. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm happy just, being in my little universe of whatever. But I think for me, a lot of what I've learned is, it's super important to put yourself out there because it's important for you to also know where you're going wrong, right?
Yeah.
And create that
Yeah.
feedback loop. So,
Yeah.
I think, don't look at social media or don't look at marketing yourself as, oh, one more task, right? Look at it as this is actually the best way for me to create a feedback loop. So I get inputs on where and how I can improve my business and on where and how I can improve myself. That's at least the way I look at it.
Very interesting. One more question, slightly more marketing specific question, because there are a lot of individual brand owners, who will start as like, maybe starting with one or two products and then it starts growing. Jewelry brands and fashion brands, particularly, which are led by women. Uh, what would you suggest to them from a content creation perspective? Because content has become such an important part of even, content, marketing for the brands, and not just you existing as a individual content creators. What is the kind of stuff that people really enjoy if you are a fashion brand or a jewelry brand, or anything in that space, right? What kind of content works there?
So I think, specifically if you're in categories where there is very little differentiation in between you and others, it's extremely important for your content to call out to what actually makes your product special. And if you were to pick up, for example, categories like fashion, home decor, jewelry, and even beauty to a certain extent. Actually, let's maybe keep beauty out of it for a second. But all these other categories actually, call out to a customer's unique tastes and preferences. So, for example, if I was building a home decor brand, a couple of things. One, I'd stick to an aesthetic, right? So figure it out. Is your brand associated with a bohemian aesthetic? Is it a Scandinavian aesthetic? Like, what aesthetic does your brand have? And create content which really showcases the usage of your product. So, for example, if you walk into an IKEA store, right? An IKEA store, and if you see an IKEA store, they create all of these hubs where you can really see the product in action and you can see the application of the product. So for instance, if I was in home and decor as a category, I would 100% over-index on application of the product, right? This is how you can style the cushion. This is how you can use my coaster. I see a lot of brands make the mistake of shooting their products against boring white backgrounds, without really thinking through where will this coaster be used in the customer's journey. So I think really thinking of what is the taste and preference that I want my customers to have, what is the style that my customers are aligning with, and how do I showcase this product in a way where a customer feels like, man, this product's beautiful, I want it in my house. And you see any of home decor brands that are stalwarts do this very well. So IKEA is one, Restoration Hardware is another, Crate and Barrel is the third. In fact, if you even open IKEA's website, they have a whole section where they just have looks, right? And then you shop.
They actually they sell basis the looks.
Exactly. And that's how home decor is sold versus, for example, a category like fashion, where fashion is sold basis, aspiration, right? Where you need to, no one buys an outfit, because it looks ugly. You buy an outfit because it makes you feel like if I wear this, it'll make me look that much better. And when you see fashion, and the narratives around fashion, again, imagery plays a massive role, showing how the garment can be worn, showing how it can be styled, talking about price points, talking about the material that goes in. I see a lot of small and independent brands do a very good job of, even showing like behind the scenes or how the product's made, because all of that breeds into your narrative, right? It helps you sell your story better. In fact, there's this really cool fashion brand that sells on LBB also called Suta, and they do saris. And the two women who run it, right? They do such a good job of showing how the saris are styled. They photograph everything on themselves. And they really show, wearing the sari on an everyday basis versus, hectic Sabyasachi style shoots. So I think the thing with a lot of these categories is this sold on aspiration, this sold by creating desire. And the only way you can really create desire is if you're calling out to what is it about your brand or your product that makes it truly special, and also showing application of that product in the customer's, day to day.
Interesting. Tell me, the next part of my question is money. So a lot of entrepreneurs have said, we as Indians anyways are not very comfortable talking about money, right? And especially if you, and I'm again going to say, if you're a women business owner, you're a woman entrepreneur, it becomes very difficult for you to quote your price, and you feel hesitant and all. How does one kind of get over that? It's a skill that needs to be acquired. It's a mental thing, I know, but anything you have because you work with so many of them?
So I think, I wish I could say, I think the best practice just makes you perfect, right? And even for me, I used to fumble a lot, and I think women end up saying, कुछ नहीं होता, जो भी whatever they're giving me, I'll take it. Let me, deal with the consequence at another day.
Yeah.
I think two things that at least have helped me, or I've seen other entrepreneurs put into use is just know your market really well, right? So the more educated you are, the more confident it is the more confident you will be, and I'm sure you see this with your own work, right? The more you know
Yes.
about what are the market rates, how much are other fashion brands selling their products at, what is the material that goes into other fashion brands, and how is yours better. I think the more educated you are about the market that you operate in, the more confidence you have in your own product, and the easier your ability to sell. Because the thing with customers is, and irrespective of whether your customer is a client, in the sense of like a large brand that's paying you money, or if your customer is someone who's shopping your consumer brand, I think at the end of the day, people buy basis the salesperson, right? And I think a good salesperson can sell anything, but the tricks that a good salesperson has up their sleeve is they know all the data points to make a customer feel like what they're selling them is that much better. So I think just knowing the market more, knowing what your comparables are, and being able to benchmark very quickly when those questions come your way. I think that's how you can build that confidence internally and externally and sell yourself better.
Interesting. Uh, Suchita, when you go out there building, especially now in India, when there is this sudden thing of, homegrown brands and all of that stuff, a lot of, this is an experience which I've seen around a lot of friends who's starting to build their own brands. There is a term that I read somewhere called community over competition. And, a lot of people that I consult with, I always tell them that it's okay to kind of reach out to parallel brands or competition brands and see what you guys can, be part of a common place and stuff like that, right? A lot of us don't know that you need to be part of communities for brands to grow, for brands to get noticed, etc. What is LBB in that sense is a community. What How does that help for smaller brands to be associated with communities and not worry about competition?
I actually think the point that you brought up is super valid, because I think the problem is, we take all our learnings from the education system that we're brought up in, where,
Yeah.
we're taught that we'll only be successful if someone else is not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think a lot of what at least I've learned is there are so many seats at the table that everyone needs to just chill out and stop worrying, unless
Yeah.
you're building something as niche as like SpaceX, or Tesla. You know what I mean? There are
Maybe you have 20 years to kind of 20 years in the background though.
exactly, yeah, and
Yeah.
20 years plus to really see results of all the work that you put
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah.
I think the truth is there are so many seats at the table, and India has a population of 1.3 billion people. That's like a lot of different types of customer personas to go after. And actually, the best brands that we see are the ones that work with either complementary brands and businesses, or work maybe with brands and businesses within the same space, but actually work together to offset a lot of the costs that may be associated with the same outcome, right? So a lot of better smaller brands that we see, they'll usually end up working on collaborative shoots, right? Where
Yeah.
X brand will bring in their furniture, Y brand will bring in their planters, a third brand will bring in their coffee company, and they'll create assets that every single brand can use, and again reducing that cost of photography or all the other elements that come into the final outcome of making that great picture happen. I think a lot of the smarter brands, and especially the brands today, right, they're all realizing that they need each other to create some amount of leverage, because distribution has just become so expensive, where it's not as easy to get Instagram followers as it was back when we started, right?
Yeah.
It's not as easy to build Facebook groups back when we started. So the only way that you can really grow is if you're working with complementary folks, and working with them to really create something massively massively impactful. At LVB, we ourselves are massive on partnerships. We don't care how big we are, how small we are. We genuinely really love partnering with everyone, right? So,
Sure.
to give you an example, we recently launched an accelerator, and we're going to be co-investing with VC in emerging consumer brands. And no one has done this before. And the first thing that came to my head was why, why won't two people with very complementary skills come together and really work towards creating something impactful, that helps the ecosystem, grow. So I think at LBB our mentality is very, there's room for all and everyone can win, as long as we identify what our value prop is, wherever it is. And I've seen the best consumer brands deploy the same lens, whether it's with complementary brands or even complementary communities that help them build their brand up better.
Interesting. Oh, this is, I mean, in my head, I'm thinking that if you are smaller business owners, or I mean, whatever business owners, right? If you actually hear this chat, there's so much of information wherein how do you market yourself? How do you take yourself out there will be there. But there's one part and slightly difficult part, which I'm not sure you've spoken about being an entrepreneur and the failures that you face, on the way. And I'm sure there would have been instances, and I want to talk about them, right? Both as an individual and as the business. Tell me what happens on days when you feel, आगे मुझे कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है. I mean, and I'm sure there would have been many, many days. What happens on day? How do you just get up?
So I mean, I've tried to think of the best answer for that because
just tell me what comes to your mind first.
So I generally am a optimist. So I'm of the school of thought which is ठीक हो जाएगा, कुछ नहीं होता, like it'll sort itself out. And in the long term, things will net out in your favor as long as you've got the right intentions of creating success not only for yourself but everyone else who you work with. So I usually on bad days, I just suck it up and I get back into the groove of things. I have a very weird way of dealing with, any form of failure. I've actually, and maybe I've become better over time, but I've actually become very good at rationalizing it because, earlier I feel like I used to take failure very personally. Like I used to take it as, I am not good enough or I have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Or I should have thought of this better. And I think it's very, in a moment of failure, it's very easy to want to point the finger at someone, whether it's yourself or it's someone else saying, it's your fault that this didn't happen the way it needed to. But I think the thing that at least I've learned through my entrepreneurship journey, and we've gone through all kinds of highs and all kinds of lows, right? We've gone through highs where, we were literally growing our revenue at a crazy pace. And then obviously last year COVID happened, and you're just like, why is my business
just
non-essential, right?
Yeah.
Especially if I'm enabling so many brands to grow.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what you realize is there's so much that happens which is genuinely not in your control. And I think at least that's what's made me more accepting of failures, which is, I really can't control everything. I can plan for the best outcome, but it's not in any one person's power to really predict what the outcome will finally be. And I think not enough people talk about this, but luck plays such a big role in where and how people end up, right? Luck plays a massive role in the difference in between a $20 million company and a $100 million company. There are so many founders that are very hardworking, that are probably smarter than, a lot of the extremely well-funded other founders that are out there. But tough luck, man. Sometimes, you're just not in the right place at the right time.
Right time.
So yeah. I think all of these things just have helped me become much more, accepting of failures. And actually now I genuinely enjoy failure. I think, I think my 2 cents would be, if you're anyone, an entrepreneur or anyone else, have a long-term outlook to your own life. Your business today may succeed, it may fail, it doesn't matter, but you need to work with the assumption that long-term, everything will check out for you and happen in the right direction. So yeah, I'm generally an optimist. So I'm sorry if I wasn't very specific with my responses.
No, that's okay.
But that's how I deal with failures.
Yeah, generally, I mean, basically that you'll figure it out in the long run.
Yeah, and I think there's enough of us who I mean, my assumption is that I mean, I feel like I've done enough good things for enough people in order for me to just generally have like a well netted out like karma score, right? So I feel like it's small things like that just help you, same thing, like rationalize that whatever happens, I'll be fine, and everyone around me will be fine as well.
Lovely, lovely. Debbie, just the last question now. You've been running LBB what, over 7 years now? Around 7 years?
Yeah, 6 or 7 years. Yeah,
6-7 years, and raising rounds, and of course running, and of course, I mean, like all businesses, you've seen last 2 years. What is it that you look forward to now? As an individual, as a professional, and of course for LBB.
I think COVID getting over is number one. So I think that's on every priority. Can this pandemic just goddamn end sooner rather than later? So I think I'm really looking forward to all of this being behind, all of us. And I think, I don't know, I think I feel like the past year and a half has given people an opportunity to really reflect on what they want, the purpose of their life to be. And I don't mean to sound like very, meta and like, Sai Baba about this, but like, people generally have, people generally have a sense of, I want to build this, right? I want my life to resonate with ABC, XYZ, and priorities have gone in all kinds of directions. So I think what I look forward to is, more of us approaching life with much more purpose, with very clearly articulated and fairly well-defined priorities. Because I think once that's set, everything, your relationships with other people, your excitement about the work that you're doing, just what you're able to bring to the table as an individual. I think a lot of that becomes very nuanced, once you're generally clear about what your purpose for yourself is. So I think, I think what I look forward to is a future with more people with hopefully much more clarity about what they want to do with their time and what they want to do with their life. That's what I'm looking forward to. And COVID being behind us.
I think COVID being behind us is like topmost priority for all of us, and getting over the losses that we've all seen in the last personal, professional, businesses, all of that. But that was such an interesting chat, Suchita. I mean, I have to say that this is also one of my first chat where I've concentrated or, spoken a lot about businesses, because I felt that, slowly as the podcast is we're doing more and more episodes, people are coming to us and talking to us about like specific questions. So I really was looking forward to this episode, and thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please make sure you hit the like button, comment what was your favorite part, and also subscribe to the channel. We have lots of fantastic people coming up. This podcast is available on your podcast app by the name Questions I Wanted to Ask. You can also follow me on social media for more updates, short format content. Links will be in the description.